embassy in Tehran. And as one of my colleagues put it, the consideration that an attack on one member state is in a sense an attack on all. And I'll read you the statement that we've issued specifically on that. The Council is outraged by the attack on the British Embassy in Tehran and utterly condemns it. It is a violation of the Vienna Convention. It also deplores the decision to expel the British ambassador from Tehran. The Council considers these actions against the UK as actions against the European Union as a whole. The EU is taking appropriate measures in response. So a two-part discussion, but very clear signals to Iran. We also talked about the situation in Camp Ashraf in Iraq. This is an area where, as you know, I appointed a personal envoy to discuss with the United Nations, with member states, with the United States and with the Iraqi government and others, the position of the 3,400 people who are in Camp Ashraf. There is an ongoing UN piece of work to try and deal with the issues and find ways to settle these people appropriately. And there is great concern in the European Parliament, in member state parliaments, with me and with others about ensuring the safety of the people there. And we are in discussion and dialogue with all the parties I've identified to make sure that we play our part in supporting the UN as they take this forward. And then my final remarks are that we had join us for an informal discussion over lunch, Secretary-General of the Arab League, Nabil al-Arabi. Our purpose was to meet institution to institution, to discuss with him the situation in the Arab Spring. Particularly, we focused on the elections in Egypt, his analysis of the current position in the Middle East peace process, and the work of the Arab League on Syria, and their proposals to Syria, and their proposals for what we call sanctions, but they were described as boycott. That was a very fruitful discussion with a lot of support from the European Union for the work of the Arab League and for Secretary-General al-Arabi's leadership. I'll stop there.
First question.
Nawab Khan from the Kuwait News Agency, Kuna. Madam Ashton, elections were held in Tunisia and Morocco and now in Egypt, and all signs are that the Islamic groups are going to become the next governments. Now, till now, the EU has shunned and boycotted any contacts with these groups. So how are you going to deal now, the EU, with the new situation when with these parties in the government? Thank you.
Well, I don't recognise the words shun or boycott. What I've always said is that we work with all political parties, with individuals across North Africa, across the Middle East, who share the same values that we do. And we've worked with a lot of people from different faiths, from different backgrounds, who support human rights, the principles of democracy, the rule of law, and will continue to do so.
Lawrence.
Lawrence Norman from Dow Jones Wall Street Journal. Baroness Ashton, after the meeting, Alain Juppé said, we've agreed to work on an oil embargo. We've agreed to work on an oil embargo. The statement and the text doesn't say that. Is he right? Can we expect some kind of step-by-step restrictions on Iranian oil imports, or have the Greeks blocked that?
Well, what we agreed in the meeting was that, and you'll see the actual text of the conclusions, was to look at a range of issues, including the energy sector. But the detail of exactly what should be done now goes into the technical experts who decide what will work, what is appropriate for European Union member states to do, and what will have what effect on Iran. So those issues are being debated.
Next question is over there.
Kadri Kukk, Estonian Television and Radio. I have a question regarding the upcoming EU-Russia summit. What do you hope to achieve there in terms of visa waiving? Thank you.
Well, when I was in Moscow the week before last meeting with Sergei Lavrov, the foreign minister, one of the purposes of that discussion was to begin to prepare for the summit. And as you know, we have been working on what we've described as common steps. The purpose of that being to look at all of the technical issues that need to be completed. I often say on issues such as visas or in trade, when I meet with foreign ministers that actually a lot of the work has to go on long before you get to the point of doing what I call proper negotiations. I used to say this as Trade Commissioner because you have to sort out all of the technical issues, and that's really the area that we were discussing. And so the preparation for that and the work that the Commission would need to see done before it could formally go to negotiations was a subject of discussion and will be a subject to the summit.
Ian, you're next.
Ian Trainer, The Guardian. Two quick points. First one on Iran, the extra sanctions and blacklists that have been mentioned today explicitly in connection with the nuclear dispute, but in relation to the embassy crisis or whatever, you're saying that the EU will take an appropriate response. What is an appropriate response, specifically on the embassy? Secondly, on Serbia, President Tadic on 2 days ago, I think, called for the barricades to be in northern Kosovo to be dismantled. Is that enough? What can he or must he do besides calling for those barricades to be removed?
On the embassy, you are right, Ian, to differentiate between the work that we were going to do anyway on the issue of sanctions and the nuclear question and what was said in the separate statement on the embassy. And what William Hague was asking colleagues to consider is whether they could do things in solidarity with the UK. He was extremely grateful for the statements that I made on behalf of all and for individual statements that ministers have made. In addition, some have taken the decision to recall their ambassadors for consultations. Others don't have embassies on the ground. Others are in dialogue with their teams on the ground to see what the appropriate thing would be. There was no requirement or request for a unanimous or one single approach, rather that each country should show in one way or another its solidarity with the UK. And I think the Foreign Secretary was very happy with what was said. In terms of Serbia, as you know, I'm in regular contact with President Tadic. He and I met last week here for dinner. I know that he feels very strongly that it's important to stop the violence in the north, and I'm very pleased with the statements that he's made. What I have asked him to do is to make sure that from Belgrade they are putting the maximum pressure on those who are perpetrating this violence to make sure that the barriers are removed. And I'm sure that member states, when they come to have their discussion at the General Affairs Council, will examine what has been done and what has been said as part of their debate about the future.
Nuruddin.
Nuruddin Fridi from Al-Arabi News. Madam Ashton, about Syria, given the level of violence and the length of the crisis and the refusal mainly by Damascus to accept to respond positively to the Arab initiative, do you see that there is a need today for an external intervention, or after your meeting with Mr. Al-Arabi, you see there is still a room for, let's say, a regional mediation to help the Syrian to get out of this crisis?
I've paid tribute before to the leadership of Nabil Al-Arabi in working with his colleagues in the Arab League to try and put forward proposals to put pressure on the regime. And in the spirit of working with them and seeing that their leadership role in this situation, we are very keen to see the effect of the proposals that they're now going to put into place in the next couple of days. And we've agreed with them that we will work with them as they do so. They believe that these could have a strong effect on the regime. They are continuing to put their pressure on. We are very keen to support their leadership on that. And we will now work with them to see what happens.
Final question.
Dragan Blagovic, Serbian Better News Agency. Ms. Ashton, French Minister Alain Juppé just said that France will support Serbia candidature for the membership, and he said that there is visible progress in the dialogue between Belgrade and Pristina. So that was the basis on what she. What was the conclusion or mood, general mood in the meeting, and what you explained to the ministers on the dialogue exactly? Thank you.
I think we, in our interim report on the dialogue last night, felt that there is progress being made, and progress on implementation as much as dialogue, because you appreciate that's a very important part of it. Nonetheless, member states are deeply concerned about the violence in the north, and there are those from member states who are directly in the front line of that violence. So it was a mixed debate. a debate of wanting to see movement. It wasn't just a discussion about Serbia, but a movement and strong support for the people of Kosovo, movement on Bosnia, Montenegro, and so on. It was a broader debate. But I think specifically on this, a sense of movement, but a desire to see more.
Thank you very much for coming. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Thank you.